What would you do if you were about to die and this came and spoke to you? I would be very afraid. But if a good-looking guy like this came up to me and was speaking to me, I might feel a little bit better about my situation. If you guys don't know, this is the great American poet Walt Whitman, and today we're going to be talking about death in one of his poems, To One Shortly to Die. First, there are a few very important things we need to cover. Number 1, this is the original manuscript of this poem, and here's the other page. Second, something very important to my argument is that we know Whitman was a mesmerist. So this quote above, I'll let you read the whole thing, but something very important is that mesmerism was also called animal magnetism. And in this quote here, it says that Whitman announced his conversion to animal magnetism as early as August 1842. This here manuscript was written around 1857 to 59. And it also says here that animal magnetism's vocabulary and lore surfaces in much of Leaves of Grass, which I have right here, and it's Walt Whitman's most famous collection of poetry. Third, I just want to say this is all my opinion. I am not an expert, but this is just what I was thinking while I was reading this poem. So what is my argument? I want to argue that in this poem, Whitman's narrator is death, maybe not one that looks like this though, and that Whitman is using mesmeric terminology to coax the reader actually into death, into their final resting place. So let's unpack it. So first of all, how could the narrator possibly be death? Let's look down here at the kind of last stanza. Softly I lay my right hand upon you. You just feel it. I do not argue. I bend my head close and half envelop it. So I saw this detail of the narrator or death physically touching, physically kind of having the reader in its constraints as something very symbolic of death, but also something that I think is used to characterize death pretty often. So for example, in this movie, Brad Pitt's character dies and the spirit of death takes his body over. This is something so random. I watched this movie not too long ago, and while I was reading this poem, I was just thinking about it because Brad Pitt in this movie is kind of an ambivalent death, not an evil death, not an immoral death, and I saw the way that death is characterized in this movie to be very similar as in this poem. Now look to the very bottom of this manuscript. I sit quietly by, I remain faithful, I am more than nurse, more than friend, more than neighbor. Now this is where we really get into it. So death is sitting by the sick reader, someone who is very shortly to die. Death is waiting for them to die. But this detail of I am more than nurse, more than parent, or neighbor is especially interesting to me because these are all human beings, and what can be more than human beings? Now, I know my man Walt here has a crazy ego, but I don't think that he's really himself here. I think he is taking on a persona greater. I think he's taking on the persona of death. A nurse, a parent, and a neighbor are all human beings that are very intimately connected with the reader. And I think that something even more intimate is death. I think everyone has a really close relationship with death, especially when they're this close to it. But if you're still not convinced, let's carry on to the second page. Let's focus your attention to the very top. I absolve you from all except yourself, spiritual, bodily, that is eternal. I guess what I was asking myself while reading this part was, who has the power to absolve? Does Walt Whitman have the power to absolve? He might think so, but I think a greater argument would be that death does. I also think that taking everything out of you that is eternal and can last forever is a job or a task that death has with each person that it visits. Now, at the very bottom of this page, I just want to say this detail really quick because I think this being the final line is really, really, really important. I do not commiserate you, I congratulate you, and that's where the poem ends. Here at Cal Poly, we just had our graduation, and we have a big ceremony just like all schools do, because it's the completion of something, it's the celebration of the finishing or the ending of something. And so what I see here is that this very last line is a congratulations that the process of death is completed. Congratulations, you're dead. Everything that is eternal within you, still exists, but now you're with death. Probably should have said this earlier, but let's go back to the first page for a moment. This is my last point on Whitman as death. Kind of. Right here in the middle where there's a bunch of scratching out and rewriting, it says, I am melancholy and stern, but melancholy or stern are crossed out, and now it says, I am exact and merciless, but I love you. And I think this is such a poignant change because I think there's nothing more exact and merciless than death. It doesn't choose randomly. It knows, it knows exactly who to choose, and it doesn't show any mercy because it's just exact. It's just point blank. You're the one to die today. It's your time. And I think that also shows in his crossing out of shortly. Right here in the 4th line, you are shortly to die, changes it to just you are to die. It's just the truth. Today's the day. Okay, now we're going to bring in that mesmerism that we talked about in the very beginning of this video. Okay, we're going back to this very important source on the Whitman archive. This quote says, in the case of phrenology, Whitman constructed a mythical persona based in large part on the results of his own phrenological examination. Hello? Okay, now this part is very important, so listen up. It says here, as a healing therapy, physicians either attempted to effect a cure by manipulating the fluid in a patient's afflicted area using either magnets or, if they possessed vast otic powers, by passing their hands over the body. Okay, so we're back here. Softly I lay my right hand upon you. So death is physically moving its hand across the reader's body, but not in the same type of mesmeric healing type of way, but more in like a soothing preparation for death type of way. And then after death is passing its hand over, it's absolving, it's taking out the things that are eternal. It says here the reader is forgetting that they're sick, and death is forgetting that they're sick. They don't see the medicines. They don't mind the weeping friends. Death is with you. Death is excluding others from you. There is nothing to be commiserated. This is not a moment for sadness. This is a moment for rejoice. So this is what I'm kind of saying about this whole poem being the process of death itself. We're starting here with death introducing itself, telling the reader that they're going to die. They know it's today. I can't prevent this. I'm exact and merciless, but I love you. I'm here. And then death lays its hand on the reader, sits by, waits. The reader begins to forget, and then is later congratulated by death. So obviously there can be some weak points to this argument. Whitman could be thinking something completely different at the time of writing this, and he could also be thinking something totally different at his last publishing of this poem, which was in the last edition of Leaves of Grass, 1891 to 92, which is 30 years after he wrote his original manuscript. He was looking a little bit more like this. He himself was a little bit closer to death, so maybe he interacted with this poem in a different way when he was closer to death or when he was doing his final revisions of it. He also had experienced so much in his life. He's experienced his family members, his mother, his brother's death. He's experienced so much death in the war, so much mesmerism with the victims that he, or the soldiers that he treated and nursed back to health in the hospitals. So what do you guys think? Is this Whitman? Is this Whitman as death? Or is this the spirit of death? Also, what kind of death is this? An amoral death? A vengeful death? A benevolent death even? Let me know. Thanks for watching.